Good day, everyone. Welcome to Tellwell's book distribution presentation. Now, book distribution is a fascinating topic. It's a little confusing, but it's one of the areas that, with a little bit of effort, can be easily explained. So let's get started. In this presentation, we're going to cover print on demand and ebooks. We'll talk about Tellwell's model of distribution and why, arguably, it's the smartest model out there. We'll discuss pricing your book, how that works, and how online retailers price your book and to what extent you can influence that. We'll go over physical bookstores and the challenge of getting into them and the whole issue of returns, where bookstores want to be able to return your book if it doesn't sell. And we'll cover royalty payments and bulk printing. So the first thing to highlight is a positive thing. If you're a positive person, this is good news that you can celebrate, which is that now, compared to the past, book distribution is by far way better than it ever was in the past. In the past, there were many gatekeepers. There still are gatekeepers on the traditional publishing model, which is a good model for some people. And those gatekeepers include trying to get a literary agent to represent you. If you can get a literary agent to say, okay, I think your book is worth publishing, then they have to try to get a traditional publisher to publish the book. And even if you get published, then bookstores would have the say whether or not they wanted to sell your book. And if they didn't, you were in a tough spot. All you could do is a very large print run, and then you had to sell the book out of the back of your vehicle or from your basement. And that's what was the only option not that long ago. Nowadays, there's 3 forces for good that have lowered the barriers to distribution of a book. Those are the internet. You can sell your book online through Amazon, which is great for many people. Print on demand means that you don't have to do a huge print run anymore, and retailers can list your book for sale even though they don't have copies of your book in stock, because it can be printed one at a time in a matter of hours, which is amazing. And finally, ebooks. A lot more people are reading Kindle, Kobo, Nook, and other ebook readers, reading on their iPhone through ebook apps. So with selling online, print on demand, and ebooks, all of these things have dramatically lowered the barriers to distribution, and it's greatly opened up the opportunities for an author who chooses to self-publish. These avenues are available, and they're good. So this is great news, the distribution changes that have happened in the last 20 years. Now, having said that, even though it's easier than ever to get your book online, get it available as an ebook, get it into print without doing a huge print run, those things are great, but there's still a huge challenge, which is that having your book available for sale on Amazon and elsewhere doesn't guarantee that your book is actually going to sell at all. What it means is that it's easy for somebody to find and purchase your book if they hear about your book in the first place and that they want to buy it. So if somebody wants your book nowadays and they hear about it, then it's very easy for them to find it online. They'll Google your book, they'll find it on Amazon, they'll find it on Chapters Indigo or Barnes & Noble's online bookstore, or maybe they'll even go into a physical bookstore and say, do you have this book that I just heard about on a radio book review? And the person at Barnes & Noble or Chapters Indigo will say, no, we don't have this book, but it's in our system, and if you want me to order it for you, I can. So having your book online for sale is great. Having it available to physical bookstores is great, but it doesn't guarantee it's going to sell. So the real challenge now is, well, how do you stand out from the competition? And how do you get exposure so some people hear about your book in a very convoluted, competitive world that we live in? And part of that, of course, involves having a quality book that's well designed, that's edited, and so on. But to have a quality book, it implies investing in a good editor, a good designer, and so on. And of course, promoting your book takes time and or money, and so quality is associated with a certain level of risk. Either a traditional publisher or in self-publishing, the author has to take a certain level of risk if they're paying for that quality that comes with good editing, good design, and so on. So distribution, though, is absolutely great compared to the past, and yet it absolutely does not guarantee any sales at all. That would be too good to be true. There are still plenty of challenges, and the real challenge now is, how do you stand out and get exposure amidst all the competition? So let's talk about print-on-demand distribution and what that means. Often you may see reference to 39,000 booksellers if you're doing research on different self-publishing companies, for example. They'll refer to their book being available on 39,000 booksellers. And what that is referring to is Ingram. And Ingram is a book distributor that has been around for decades and decades, the largest book distributor in North America, and they distribute outside of North America as well. And they've got a great reputation, and they've been working with traditional publishers for many decades. In the late 1990s, they started a new service, which is now called Lightningsource, which is a large printing operation that allows them to print one book at a time in a matter of hours. And Ingram is a distributor, and it owns this printing service called Lightningsource. And what they realized they could do is basically make books available without doing a print run and listing them through Ingram to all of the booksellers who already have accounts with Ingram. So if you picture the bookselling industry, you've got thousands and thousands of publishers, and then you have thousands and thousands of retailers and bookstores. And in the middle, you need a company that simplifies things. You can't have thousands of publishers dealing with thousands of retailers. It becomes too complex. So companies come in and they act as middlemen, and they simplify things. So that's what Ingram is, as a middleman between publishers on the one hand and book retailers on the other end. And what they did is create this company called Lightningsource, and what that allowed them to do is, for traditional publishers, books where they did the first print run and it sold out, and then maybe a second print run, but they no longer had any books left over, those traditional publishers could now make their book available through Lightningsource and Ingram. This also made it possible for people who were self-publishing and didn't want to take the risk of doing a big print run to have their book available through Lightningsource and Ingram. So it's an amazing service. They've got printing operations in several locations in the US, mentioned there on the right, as well as in England and Australia. So all of the 39,000 booksellers, what that means is they have accounts with Ingram. It doesn't mean they're automatically going to buy your book. That would be great if you got 39,000 book sales automatically, but that's not how it works. It just means that all of those companies, which includes the big mainstream booksellers as well as independent bookstores, they have accounts with Ingram often by default. So they'll have access to your book, and many of those companies, such as Amazon, Chapters in Indigo, Barnes & Noble, will list automatically most of the books that are made available through Ingram, which includes all of the books uploaded to Lightningsource. So these companies will make the book available for sale, and if somebody buys it, then they order the book through Ingram, and that book is printed, packaged, shipped, all in a matter of hours to be printed, and it can be a day or two to be shipped. So because it's printed and shipped so fast, many booksellers will just say, yeah, we have the book in stock. They don't necessarily, but they say that since they essentially can print it and ship it so fast, they decide to list it online for sale. So usually they don't actually stock the book. Amazon might. They may print a couple of copies, and if it starts selling, they print more. And these booksellers may list the book as in stock, and the quality is excellent. So now on the downside, as I said, there's no guarantee these 39,000 companies will sell your book or that they will post it on their online web store. Many of the big companies do, which is great, but there's no guarantee. Some booksellers may take the data from Ingram, but they may screw it up. They may post it wrong. They may make a mistake. They may not upload the photo properly. And there's 39,000 companies. Who knows what the quality of all those websites are? Some will do it perfectly, some won't. It's hard to control that. And you list what you want the book to be sold at, the suggested retail price, but ultimately they don't have to sell it at that price. And of course, the shipping and pricing policies for every company will vary. So it's a great service, but it's got some downsides as well. Now let's talk about ebooks. Which ones matter? So Kindle is the most popular ebook in the world, and it's owned by Amazon. And the second most popular in the world, and the most popular in Canada, is the Kobo. And it's the most popular because it's the one that they sell within Chapters Indigo bookstore. And then there's what I would call the rest of the ebook channels. So Barnes & Noble's Nook, there's apps on your iPhone and iPad, and there's various other ebook sales channels and various ebook devices. And Smashwords is a company that aggregates together all of those different ebook channels, and you can sell your book through Smashwords. So the way royalties work with ebooks is you can get 70% of the sale price of your ebook on Kindle if you price your book between $2.99 and $9.99. And if you price your book outside that range, you only get 35%, and Amazon keeps the other 75%. And you can price your book as low as 99 cents, but you'd only get a 35% royalty. Now, it's similar with Kobo. They'll give you 70% of the sale price if you price your book at $2.99 or more, and you must price your book at least 20% lower than the print edition of your book. So what net royalty refers to, when we say we give you 100% of the net royalty, that means that if you would be getting 70% of the sale price if you were a publisher or dealing directly with Kindle, well, with 100% net royalties, you'll get that full 70%. So now let's talk about the Tellwell model of distribution. There's two features that differentiate Tellwell from other companies. One is smart distribution, and the other is a full service team approach to publishing. So in this chart, we're comparing Tellwell to the other do-it-yourself distribution channels. Now, I don't consider these channels to be competitors of ours. Rather, they are partners of ours. But even as partners, in a sense, we end up being, the reason we say smart distribution is we're doing our distribution in a way that takes advantage of the best aspects of each of these partners. And if these partners do something not very well, we skip that part and we don't use them. So that's one reason why we call our model smart distribution. Another reason is that really this model is based off of being in the industry for years and years and looking at what the most savvy independent authors were doing. And what they were doing was saying, you know what, let's not work with any of these self-publishing companies because they have a horrible distribution deal. They're working with Ingram and Lightningsource like all the other companies are, but by working with those companies, you end up getting really screwed over in terms of royalties and the distribution side of printing. So what Tellwell does is what those really smart independent authors do, but which is difficult to do because it requires being more technically savvy. So the first column there is Tellwell, and the second column is Ingram Spark. And Ingram Spark is essentially Lightningsource and Ingram, a service that they provide for print on demand that gets your book into print and makes it available to those 39,000 booksellers that we were talking about. Now, they do a great job, so what we said is we can't compete with them on that, so let's just work with them on that. And so we use Lightningsource and we use Ingram, which is essentially the same as Ingram Spark, for print-on-demand distribution of all of our books. Now, Ingram Spark will also distribute Kindle ebooks and Kobo ebooks and various other ebooks, but when they do that, they give you a not-so-good deal when it comes to royalties. So what we do is say, yes, let's use Lightningsource and Ingram where they're strong, where they're best, but let's opt out of their ebook distribution. Now, another thing to point out about Ingram Spark and Lightningsource is these are do-it-yourself options because they don't provide a long range of support that many authors need. Some people will say, I can publish for free using Kindle or Kobo, but what they really mean is they can upload a book to Kindle or Kobo, assuming they can do all of that technically and assuming they've already hired their own editor and designer and they're doing their own marketing and they don't need any guidance. So there's many things that are being left out when somebody says, oh, I can publish my book for free doing such and such. So what this chart does is really highlight those things. So in the top half of the chart is smart distribution. So Kindle is great at distributing Kindle books. So that's what we use them for. And Kobo is also excellent. You get the 70% royalty. And so what we do is we opt out of distributing your book through Ingram to Kobo because you'd only get 40%. And we also opt out of distributing your book through Kobo to Smashwords because you would only get the 85% net royalty, which means you'd get less than 70%. So what Tellwell does is we connect you directly to Kindle, by which I mean we give you the full 100% royalty if you're in our 100% royalty option. And we do the same for Kobo, which means we opt out of distributing your book through Kindle and Kobo via Ingram Spark or via Smashwords because we can do better. And then we do use Smashwords basically to cover all the rest of the ebook channels. So by basically picking and choosing the best channel to get your book distributed for print and for ebooks, that's what we call smart distribution. And then the lower half of the chart here really refers to that full service team approach to publishing a book. Because while strictly speaking it's possible to publish for free by uploading a document onto Kindle, what you're not getting is editing and design and marketing, and all of these things can have incredible value that is worth paying for. And while publishing for free is possible, it's not the best option for people who take their book seriously and want a professional level of publishing. Now let's look at the Tellwell model and compare Tellwell to one of the other full-service self-publishing companies. So the way that we're different than most other companies is that we connect you with 100% net royalties and we don't inflate the distribution costs the way that other companies do. So pretty much all of the self-publishing companies in the industry use the same distribution channels, but they do it in a way that they inflate the distribution costs. And even though the author is the one who's taking the risk and who is investing in publishing their book, normally the positive side of that is that while the author takes the risk, they get all the benefit and the rewards of self-publishing, which includes higher royalties and more control and flexibility in how you price your book. So unfortunately, most self-publishing companies have very low royalties, high print costs, inflexible book pricing, and they use captive pricing policies with regards to printing. For example, once you publish with them, you have to print with them. They don't offer you the option of print-ready files, or they force you to print with them for a year or more before you have the option of printing elsewhere. And what they'll also do is have inflexibility in how you price your book. So let's look at this chart, for example. Ex Libris, based on the information on their website, they would have a 200-page black and white book automatically priced at $19.99 US. Now, if you took that same book with Tellwell, because we're giving 100% of the net royalties, if you priced your book at $19.99, you would get over $10 in a royalty. That's over 400% higher royalty by working with Tellwell. Or another way to put it is that you could reduce your price from $19.99 all the way down to less than $8 and still be earning a $2 royalty. So that's an incredible difference. And with Tellwell, you get incredible flexibility in how you price your book. You could price your book all the way down to $7 or lower if your goal was just to sell books and you didn't care about royalties and were wanting to minimize your royalty. And then if you move on to Kindle ebooks and Kobo ebooks, with Tellwell you can get 75%. If you choose to publish with, a company such as this, you would get half of the royalties going to the publisher. And then when it comes to offset printing, Tellwell has negotiated with over 50 printers, and we've built up a awesome printing service. And some of the pricing on, for example, 500 copies here, with us, $3.94 for a 200-page black and white paperback. And with this company, it's over $10. A 500-page color book, hardcover, with us, it's less than $8. With them, it's $32. So a huge difference. And again, with Tellwell, you have the option of purchasing your print-ready PDF at any time, and you've got the full flexibility over pricing mentioned above. Now let's talk about pricing the print edition of your book. There's 4 components to the price of your book. There's the list price, quote unquote, sometimes called a suggested retail price or a manufacturer's suggested retail price or a recommended price that you set. And what it is not is the actual retail price, which is decided by the bookseller. So you set the list price. The next thing that you set is the wholesale discount of 30 to 55%. That determines how much of a discount booksellers get when they buy your book so that they can make a margin and make some money as well. And then the third piece is the print-on-demand fulfillment cost, which is based on the book specifications, the page count, dimensions, whether it's black and white or color, and the paperback or hardcover. And this affects the cost of Ingram's Lightningsource production facility when it receives an order and within hours or a day prints it, packages it, and ships it. That cost needs to be deducted from your royalty as well. So your royalty equals the list price you set less the wholesale discount that you set, less the print-on-demand fulfillment costs. And with Tellwell, you have that flexibility in setting the discount of 30 to 55%, whereas with many companies, you don't get to set that price. So let's look at an example. You set the list price for a book, let's say $20, and you set the wholesale discount of 30 to 55%. Let's say you set it at 30%. So the $20 book has a 30% discount, which is $6. $6 is 30% of $20. So that leaves you with $14, which is what Ingram essentially is paying you when a bookseller orders your book. And Ingram takes a piece of that $6 discount, and they don't pass on the full discount to retailers. So let's say Ingram keeps $2 and gives the bookseller a $4 discount. What this ultimately means is that by setting the list price or suggested retail price and by setting the discount, you effectively only control the price that retailers buy your book at. At the end of the day, you don't control what they sell it at. Another thing that's unique about Tellwell is when you look at the print-on-demand fulfillment cost that Ingram charges for producing the book, some companies will massively inflate that cost when determining your royalty, whereas with Tellwell, we use the actual cost there, which is very, very, very competitive at their massive operation, Lightningsource. And with Tellwell, on the bottom of our website, there is a link to the royalty calculator, which is very transparent. And again, some companies don't disclose exactly what the royalty is and how pricing is. With Tellwell, it's on our website. There's a calculator. It's the most transparent that it can be. So how should you price your book? Well, the discount options are 30 to 55%. And fortunately, what we found is that if you set a discount at only 30%, well, your royalty is going to be much higher because you're giving less to the retailer as a discount and you're keeping more of that for your own royalty. And the good news is most major online retailers like Amazon and Chapters Indigo and Barnes & Noble, on their online stores, they will list the book for sale even with a 30% discount. Again, it's not guaranteed absolutely, but they seem to list virtually all of the books that are available through Ingram at just a 30% discount. Many European retailers want that bumped up a little bit to 35% to be available on the online bookstore. And so that's what we will typically do as a default when pricing a book with an author. It's what we'll recommend is going with a 30% discount in the US and Canada and then 35% in Europe. So when would you choose a 55% discount? Well, if you choose 55%, you're giving away a lot more of the suggested retail price of your book to the seller, and that reduces your royalty significantly. The reason people do it is 55% is the standard discount that a physical bookstore would want to see. And they don't get all of that 55%. Ingram keeps a portion of it, and the physical bookstore would get, let's say, 40% or so. Now, that's the discount they want. Unfortunately, if you set a 55% discount because you're trying to target physical bookstores, that discount also applies to all your sales through online stores. And there's not really a way to discriminate. You don't know how somebody's going to sell your book. They buy the book at the discount that it's available at through Ingram, and they could sell it at physical bookstores or online. There's no way to discriminate between the two. So if you target a physical bookstore with a 55% discount, which is not a guarantee that they're going to actually order your book, but it makes it more attractive, then that's going to affect all of your online sales as well. Unless, and this is something Tellwell can do in a more sophisticated way, there's sometimes a way that we can list your book with a 55% discount through Ingram, but then simultaneously make it available through Amazon's print-on-demand service. And there's a way we can sort of do a workaround so that you can get a higher royalty online and make your book more attractive to bookstores. So, how do you price your book? Well, there's no scientific answer as to what's the best price for your book without extensive survey. So in a sense, what you're trying to do is find that sweet spot that is pricing your book high enough that you're getting a decent royalty, but not so high that you're going to be turning away a lot of readers. And there's one word of caution here. Some authors will try to price their book so low that minimizes their royalty, but it makes their book, they think, more attractive to readers. But here's the problem. You don't know that retailers are going to use that price. Sometimes if you price your book too low, retailers will look at that and say, nah, and they price it higher, and you don't get that royalty with the higher price. You get the royalty based on your suggested price and the discount. That determines your royalty. And a retailer is not obligated to use that price. So if they end up pricing your book higher than you want them to, they're keeping the difference, not you. On the other hand, if you set your list price higher and then put a discount, and a retailer prices the book lower than you want them to price it, well, you're still going to get the full royalty based on your list price and the discount. And by selling at a lower price, the retailer is only affecting their own margin, not yours. So find the sweet spot. It's a bit of a guess. Price your book high enough to maximize your royalty, but look at the competition, look at other books, and price it not so high that you're going to price yourself out of the market. And again, use Tellwell's online royalty calculator to play around with those prices. So how do you price your ebook? Well, recall that to get the 70% royalty, you need to price it in the $2.99 to $9.99 price range. So often that's a starting point. Smashwords has done a lot of research on which price points their books sell at the most. And what they've found is that the most popular price points for fiction books, which tend to be priced lower than nonfiction, the price points that maximize sales are $3.99, $4.99, 99 cents, and $2.99. So those are the most popular 4 price points for fiction ebooks. $3.99, $4.99, 99, and $2.99 in that order. Now, for nonfiction books, it often implies a higher value. Often nonfiction books are more premium products, so you price it closer to the $9.99 in that $7.99 to $9.99 price point. And what Smashwords has found is that the highest royalty price points are $4.99, $9.99, and $3.99 in that order. So to price your ebook, if you want to maximize if you want to get the 70% royalty, you go in the $2.99 to $9.99 range. And then for fiction, it's on the lower end of that scale, $2.99, $3.99, and $4.99. For nonfiction, it's on the higher end of that scale in the $7.99 to $9.99 range. So we're going to finish this presentation talking about physical bookstore returns, royalties, and bulk printing. But let's do a quick review of the good, the bad, and the ugly of book distribution for print on demand. So the good news is Tellwell uses the same distribution channels that other companies use, but we do it in a way that's smarter, the way that the most savvy independent authors do. We pick and choose where to get the highest royalties. Another good thing is Amazon and other major retailers automatically list the vast majority of books just by being listed on Ingram. So that makes your book available in some of the mainstream retailers, which is fantastic. Many physical bookstores, even if they don't stock your book, they'll order it at request if a customer comes in because they hear about your book. So that's great. And even if online retailers don't actually have copies of your book, because it's with Ingram and Lightningsource and they know it can be printed in 24 hours, they will often list the book as available or in stock even though they don't have copies, because they know it can be printed and shipped so fast. And the quality is excellent. It's used by traditional publishers as well as self-publishing companies. Now, the bad news. of the 39,000 retailers, that sounds great, all those booksellers, but the fact is it's really only a few of them that matter the most. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Chapters, the vast majority of those 39,000 are not that relevant. And of course, not all of those, it doesn't mean that any of those bookstores are going to order your book right off the bat unless they choose to. And finally, you need to promote your book to generate sales. Just by being available to those 39,000 booksellers doesn't mean any of them are going to actually order any copies until you're promoting your book and generating demand and readers actually want it. Now, the ugly. Retailers don't have to sell at your suggested retail price. That's not something you can control. And retailers may post your information incorrectly on their website. The image may not show up for the first couple months or ever, or they may have some of the data incorrectly posted on their website. Now, there's 39,000 companies out there who are pulling this data. Who's to say that any one of them won't screw something up on their website? And finally, these companies control the shipping costs and the timelines, and that's not something you can control. If a retailer takes a long time to process an order, that affects you negatively. But to be positive, let's remember that book distribution is better now than ever in history. It's really incredible, the accessibility that you have with your book. Gone are the gatekeepers. The only real gatekeeper are readers. And of course, the gatekeepers to media to get exposure for your book. And if you're with Tellwell, our distribution model is making the most of the best aspects of that distribution that's available today, in contrast to some companies which use the distribution channels, which are great, but they massively inflate the distribution costs, or they take a large percentage of the royalties for themselves. So by working with Tellwell, you've basically got the best of the distribution options that are available today. So many authors ask us how to get into physical bookstores. So here's the thing, physical retail stores have limited shelf space, and to put your book on that shelf space, they have to put out cash. And these stores want to avoid risk. Interestingly, since the Great Depression in the 1930s, that's when the model of returns came into the book industry. In most retail industries, retailers buy products and then they sell them. In the book industry, it's different. Essentially, it's almost like a consignment system. What it is bookstores order the book through Ingram or through publishers if they're big and have their own distribution, but they want to be able to return the book if it doesn't sell, almost like consignment. And publishers and distributors, they let them. Ever since the Great Depression, bookstores were struggling and publishers said, okay, take the book, try to sell it, and if it doesn't sell, we'll take the book back. And the industry is still like that. It's a unique retail industry. So, if you want to sell your book through physical bookstores, you've got two general options. The first is consignment, and the second is making your book available through Ingram in the way that they want it to be available, which we'll discuss. So, the first is consignment. And if you're familiar with consignment, essentially what it means is you order the books and then you bring them to the store and you give them to them for free, not for free, but if the book does sell, you have an agreement with that bookstore, you get 50% or what have you. And what we found is that local bookstores, each of them has a slightly different preferred consignment agreement, and that's something our marketing consultants can help you with if you're interested. So, what a bookstore is looking for, though, is they want to make sure that it's a quality book. If you did not edit your book, a bookstore is not going to want to stock it. They will be embarrassed if a customer returns the book because it's filled with errors. So editing is important if you're going to target traditional bookstores. Having a marketing plan is important as well. If that bookstore knows that you're going to be promoting the book locally, then they are more likely to want to stock your book because it's promoting their bookstore as well. And often a bookstore will allow you to come into the bookstore and they'll have a program where for a day or what have you, you can sit there at a desk and actually sell your book in person and do signings. And so that's something you can look into with local bookstores. And even big retailers like Chapters, Indigo, or Barnes & Noble, often they have programs for local authors or authors that aren't local but who are going to come in and sell their book in person. So inquire, make those phone calls, and you may be surprised. And in our experience, even some of the big retailers are sometimes more receptive than some of the smaller ones. So the second option is to just promote your book and let the retailer buy your book through Ingram. So if that's the case, what the bookstore will want is that you set the book at a 55% discount and you have a returns option, which means if the book doesn't sell, they can return it and get their money back. And again, they're interested in quality, in a well-edited book, and in a book that's being marketed, the same as with consignment. So Tellwell has a returns program, and what we'll do is when we list your book on Ingram, we'll make the book returnable. And our program is modeled on what a traditional publisher would do. Now, when you do this, you're taking on a risk. So what a traditional publisher would do is, first of all, set the book price high enough that they're earning a decent royalty, so that even if there are returns, and there often are returns that can be 25% or up to 50% returns, you want your royalty to be high enough so that your royalty on the books that don't get returned covers all of the costs of those returns. So that's the first thing we do at Tellwell, is we essentially force you to price your book high enough so that you're protecting yourself and self-insuring. And if you price your book too low, then you're earning such a small royalty. And then if there are returns, you end up with losses and you end up having to pay an invoice. So what a traditioner calls this is a reserve fund. You price your book high enough, you create a reserve fund to cover any returns. And if there are no returns, great. Then you can take that reserve fund and treat it as a royalty. So at the end of the day, to get into physical bookstores is a competitive process. First, you have to set a higher discount, which cuts into your royalties and gives a greater share to the retailer. Second, you need to make the book returnable. And then third, you need to have a good quality book and you need to be promoting it effectively. All of those things make your book attractive, but don't guarantee that a bookstore is going to want to stock it. And what I often do is say, imagine that you owned a bookstore and you had limited space and you had to put out cash to stock the books that you chose. Which books would you want to stock in your store? Well, you're going to want to stock books that hopefully will sell. And for those books to sell, you want to see that there's some sort of marketing going into that book, and you also want to make sure that you're earning a significant piece of the pie to justify choosing that book over all of the other books that are available. Now, one final point is that many self-publishing companies will have a book returns program, and the interesting thing is that with Tellwell's model, we're giving authors 100% of the royalties, and we're not inflating those print-on-demand fulfillment costs. What other companies will do is they will massively inflate those production costs, and they don't disclose how much of that they're taking. And so what they're essentially doing is creating their own reserve fund. With Tellwell, we force you to price the book so that you're getting a really high royalty and you're pooling that money into a reserve fund. What other companies do is they don't disclose how much of a reserve fund they're taking for themselves, but essentially that publisher is protecting themselves and earning a large portion of the revenue, and they're able to use that to cover any returns cost. So here's an example of a monthly royalty report with Tellwell. You can see that we break down the units sold and a certain level of detail as to where the book sold. Now, we only have access to a bit of detail, and we do pass that detail on to you. For Ingram sales, you can see it's broken down by currency, UK, US, and whether it's paperback or hardcover. And then we also break out the Kobo sales, which we do directly with Kobo, and then Amazon sales. So this is what a monthly report would look like, and then we make payments quarterly based on the royalties that we've received. Now finally, if you want to order books for yourself, for marketing purposes, and so on, Tellwell has a printing network that extends from the USA to Canada to Australia, England, and China. And the best place to print the book depends on the volume and the type of book that you're printing. So we can provide you with the printing costs for that. And it's important to note that the cost per book comes down based on the volume of books that you're ordering. While it would be nice to print locally most of the time, the reality is that for some types of books, like large, high quality, color books that are high page count, this can become cost prohibitive printing locally, and that's where often even traditional publishers print in China. And if you go to a local bookstore, you'll see that a lot of the large, high quality color books are printed overseas because of the cost considerations. So if you're doing an order from China, we handle all of the customs and logistics and so on, and we can provide a quote for that. Now, a final point is that most self-publishing companies, if you choose to publish with them, you're obligated to print with them. And often that means printing at very high prices. Tellwell is one of the only companies that doesn't use that captive pricing model. We'll make your print-ready PDFs available to you from day one. If you want it, we do charge a fee, but it's a fee that's less than other companies. And we don't require that you print exclusively with us for 1 year or more, which other companies do. Or what some companies do is they say, you have to take your book out of distribution and unpublish it with us before we'll give you any files at all for printing. So that's quite drastic, and Tellwell is very unique in that we don't use that captive pricing model. We've got a great printing service. We can provide you with quotes, but if you choose to go elsewhere, that's your choice. And that concludes our distribution presentation.